Hi. First off, I'd like to thank everybody, obviously, for joining us for the next 45 minutes, and an extra special thanks, given that we're the last session of today. So we're the diehards in the room, we're the real recruiters, we're here until the very end. So it's been a great day, and I'd like to thank Elise and the LinkedIn recruiter team as well for everything that they've done for us in terms of preparation in the lead up to today as well. We're going to focus on our relationship with LinkedIn over the last six to 8 years and how that relationship has evolved, in particular through a number of different key initiatives and how we've related it directly to research within our teams. So I'm going to start off by introducing this lady here on my left. So this lady is Olivia Dunne. Olivia is our Senior Manager for Global Staffing Operations. Sits beside me on a day-to-day basis in a team that we have in Cork in Ireland, a team that's seen as its global centre of excellence, where we have 20 members of staffing that recruit for locations all over the world. Olivia is a really, really great example of somebody who, through the right attitude, general level of professionalism in everything that she does, has really progressed her career within our staffing organisation at VMware. So over the past 5 years since she originally joined, she first started as what we call a candidate development recruiter. So what does that mean? Candidate development recruiter is our term for an internal talent sourcer. Very quickly, she moved into an EMEA-wide staffing partner position. So through that role, she was responsible for hiring into all of our locations across EMEA, all of our role types across EMEA, and all of the different levels that we hire into across EMEA. So she stayed in that role for in or around 3 years, and just 9 months ago moved into her current position. Why we love Olivia as the day-to-day recruiters and the day-to-day recruitment teams is that as a member of staffing operations, she's responsible for all of our global process, all of our systems that we use, various tools, our global relationship with LinkedIn, has input into our employee referral program, and that's just touching the surface. But why we love her is because whatever initiative that she's rolling out in terms of best practice, she will always relate it to her time as a recruiter. So we feel very privileged to have her sitting beside us because she is responsible for up to 150 people on some of these initiatives. The one piece which I'm going to distance myself from Olivia for the next 45 minutes is her choice in music. So she's selected 5 different tracks because our session is broken up into 5 different sections, as she does like to consider herself as her own team in-house DJ. So please bear with us on this. I'm distancing myself from this from here on in. Olivia, over to you.
I paid him a small fortune to say all those nice things, and he's just destroyed it now by dissing my music choices. It's not as bad as he's made out, I promise. But despite what he's just said, I would still like to introduce my colleague, Joe Hendry, who is our Senior Manager for EMEA and APJ Candidate Development Recruitment. Joe has been with VMware for almost 6 years now, and he's certainly been one of the most instrumental people in terms of building out our talent acquisition, both regionally and globally. When Joe originally joined the team, he was responsible for 12 sourcers based in the Cork office who hired for every discipline across EMEA. After that position, he moved into a leadership role with responsibility for global staffing operations, again across all the Americas, EMEA and APJ. Later, he took on the position of being a senior manager for EMEA staffing. This time he was leading a team of 16 recruiters, again recruiting for every discipline, every level, every function across all our locations in EMEA. During this particular time under Joe's leadership, the Cork team became recognised as a global staffing centre of excellence, something that the team is extremely proud of. And finally, in January of this year, Joe, as if he didn't have enough to do, increased his scope and responsibility, and now he is in charge of a team of EMEA and APJ candidate development recruiters. So it goes without saying that Joe has seen every aspect of talent acquisition from VMware's perspective. So if anyone has any questions, direct them that way.
And
that's what I normally do.
Right back that way. So we have a number of different quotes from some iconic figures to introduce us to each of our sections over the next 45 minutes. The real key word that I'd like to focus within this section is that of imagination. So if I take myself back 6 years ago when I first joined VMware, I received a phone call from a guy called James Malloy. And James Malloy still remains my manager actually to this day. James is the current head of sourcing globally for VMware. And at the time when I received the call, I was in a senior recruiter position within a different sector. And the role that James was calling me about was an internal sourcing role. And I suppose there is a perception maybe at times that moving from a senior recruiter position into a sourcing role may actually be a step back. But from what James was describing to me, and this reference to imagination, it sounded very, very different than anything that I had heard before. So there was a real theme of innovation, creativity, and research, what we're going to be covering today. I started to get intrigued, and because of that, I asked for a copy of the job description and the content within the job description. Again, very, very unique and stuff that mentioned the tools that I had never heard before. So where I'm going with this is that our focus on LinkedIn is very, very much, we look at the recruiter element of the tool and the reach outs element of the tool is just a fraction of the strategy that we use. Our organization, VMware, it's the global #1 within virtualization. We are seeing more and more that as an organization, we need to be dynamic, we need to be creative, we need to be agile in the products that we're passing to our customers and meeting the demands of our customers. With that, we've taken that ethos to our staffing teams. And anybody that we do hire into our staffing teams, when they are going through the interview process, we also look for that creativity and that focus on research. So it really is that dynamic type organization. Things that we will award are risk takers. We have our own risk-taking award within the staffing function as well. So the recruiter element is only a fraction of what we do, and what we want to really give back to everybody today is some elements of how we've evolved the tool, and we're going to go through a whole number of different sections on that. I'm going to just, all of this stuff really, really puts us in a good position with our hiring managers and with the business as well, because it's cool stuff. It allows them to view us more as a strategic function rather than an admin function. And just to finish off on this piece, again, I'll make reference to the guy that hired me, James Malloy. One thing that he instilled with me when I first joined over my first few weeks versus previous organizations, where it was all very much focused in previous organizations around the metrics and getting the hire in as quickly as possible. James took a different approach, and he was looking at things like market mapping, employer branding, building relationships with our key business leaders, all this really, really cool stuff. And the quote from him was that the byproduct, if you are doing all the right things, the byproduct naturally becomes the metric anyway. So the metric looks after itself if you are doing the right things. And that's something that we do continue to instill within our own teams. So very quickly, what we're going to cover today in these 5 different areas, and each of these 5 areas does have a song from Olivia, so apologies. But as we get towards the end, the build and the execute, we're going to be giving you back some real tangible takeaways from these sections, and really, really focusing in on, I would argue, if anybody in the room isn't measured on this, if you are within a talent acquisition function or within an agency, and that's time to hire and time to fill. So how do some of these stats have really impacted our own time to hire and time to fill? Some cool stuff within the prepare and the explore sections, particularly around how we're combining LinkedIn with how we use social media as it has evolved, and specific to different locations. I'm sure many people would agree that different social media tools will be perceived very differently in different locations. We're going to speak around a concept known as live search that we now use as being mandatory across all of our requisitions, and the training element. So before Olivia goes into the training element and we listen to our first song, one of the things that we look at in terms of training, and we have brought in external vendors a number of times over the last number of years, but the level of expertise within our own teams is as strong, if not stronger in many cases. So we use it as a development opportunity, and we have a whole bunch of internal SMEs that focus on how we're using LinkedIn Recruiter as well. So our first song is up now.
It's not possible to talk about training with a little bit of Eye of the Tiger in the background, so I'm hoping that's getting you pumped up for the 5 steps on our journey here. This first step is in relation to training, and you'll see from the quote behind me, I don't need easy, I just need possible. And I'll explain a little bit why we've picked that quote for this section. If recruitment was easy, everybody would be doing it, but instead it's people like Joe, myself, like yourself in the audience, who are career recruiters. And we all know that a search is not finished or over until you found that candidate. And some cases, the searches can be time-consuming and arduous. So our philosophy when it comes to searching is, we know it may not be easy, but we know that it is possible. in order for us to set the basis for our mindset around that, every recruiter's journey within VMware starts with a training program and an induction. And of course, that covers our global practices and processes, tools, resources, people, and customs. So I'm sure that's familiar to a lot of you in the audience as well. However, one of the things that we really focus on within that is how we make best use of our LinkedIn Recruiter accounts. So again, most recruiters are familiar with LinkedIn Recruiter accounts, and we have found that if we spend an extra bit of time around the training and the use of that tool, we can greatly change our response rates. We know from working with our colleagues in LinkedIn through operational reviews that over previous years, our response rates were somewhere between 20 to 22% usually, which is a decent enough figure and is comparable with our peers in the technology industry as well. However, we did want to make an improvement in that number for ourselves, push forward, get the figures higher. So we customized our training around LinkedIn Recruiter specifically. One of the areas that we look at in terms of training is harnessing LinkedIn in order to spread the message about our employer value proposition, or our EVP. So that includes all our brand material, it includes all articles and news about VMware, it includes information about initiatives and programs, for example, like Great Places to Work, and it also would include reviews about us, written by us, for us, and so on. So all of that information goes out, and we harness the power of LinkedIn and LinkedIn Recruiter to share those messages. The second thing that we do is when it comes to our in-mails, we try to create a global and cultural awareness around the messages that we send as well. So, and most of those things are quite simple. So for example, it could be in a particular country or region, it's actually more appropriate to use a person's title and surname rather than the more casual first name when it comes to in-mailing somebody. In some areas as well, building the relationship is much more important than just sending through a job description to certain individuals. So again, what we do in that situation is start the relationship from that very first in-mail. Tell them a little bit about VMware, about our values, about our vision, and that leads naturally on to our opportunities within the company. So again, more than just attaching the job description. The other element that we do is we try to personalize our in-mail messages as much as possible. So for example, we may have some feedback or comments from a hiring manager who has reviewed resumes, or during a live search has made a comment about a candidate profile as we're going through different candidate profiles there. In that case, we take those nuggets of information and we build them into the in-mail message so that it really does create a unique message to that candidate just about them. And the last thing that we do around personalizing, if we're reaching out to candidates, we try to use a word or two or a sentence or two in the native language of that candidate if we know English is not the first language that they speak. And we do that in conjunction with the language skills that we have in our own team as well. And it's amazing how powerful and reactive it is when someone sees their own language in an in-mail that they're receiving, rather than being bombarded with thousands of generic English ones as well. With all of these enhancements put together, we have seen an improvement in our response rates. So the first figure that you can see up there, 32% is our average response rate across the global team now. So it's gone up at least 10% overall. 53% of our team are at least achieving 32% response rate or higher. So again, over half the group are in that higher element when it comes to usage of the tool. They're always going to be top users of any tool or resource that you provide. So there's actually 12% of our team who are consistently able to achieve between 50 to 70% in terms of their response rate. So that's a remarkable element. And a lot of that is down to the extent of the customization that they do around their messages. But one fantastic thing that we did discover during an operational review, our colleagues in LinkedIn were able to track the candidates who had had interaction with our EVP. And if they looked at those pool of candidates, the response rate within that group was actually 51%. So the value of the EVP behind our messaging was really critical. So that was a fantastic thing that we were able to improve and discover this year in particular. So as you can see from those results, our induction training is key to what we do, but specifically the training that we do around LinkedIn Recruiter as well is absolutely critical. And we keep evolving that, we keep it fresh from ideas from the team, and indeed when new members join the team as well, after a couple of weeks, one of the first things we ask them is about their induction and training. What else would they do differently? What else would they add? And a lot of that feeds in around the tools and resources that we have. So I'll hand you over to Joe for our next section.
Okay, so we've had Don't Stop Believing, we've had Eye of the Tiger, and I'm just doing a quick room check, and I think we still have the same number of people without any leavers so far.
They're loving it. Don't be minding him.
It does
They're
get better
loving it.
from here on in, I promise. We've got some disco and we've got some Irish stuff on the way, so stay with us. The reason why we've used this quote from Elon Musk, when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. It relates to how we encourage ideas from our own teams all the time. So we run a global survey that we set as being mandatory within our own teams in or around every 6 months. And the reason why we do this across almost 150 members of staffing is that we will always get at least one or two real gems in terms of how we can add to our process or a tool that we're not using, employer branding ideas, social media ideas, etc. So these two aspects, market mapping and live search, two very different concepts, but relating to the real key theme of today as to how we use LinkedIn Recruiter as a research tool, are both ideas that originally came from team members within our staffing organization. But they're both now mandatory in different kind of aspects, in that the market mapping focuses more so on large-scale hiring projects. Live search focuses more so on individual requisitions. So market mapping, if I start by explaining what market mapping entails, the end product of a market mapping project will have 3 different layers. So the first layer will be a whole set of organization charts as a result of conducting this piece of research, with a combination of the LinkedIn Recruiter tool plus our own applicant tracking system. So if I was to use a large-scale hiring project that we're doing across multiple countries across Europe versus a certain skill set that we're looking for, we will map those countries versus a whole maybe 8 to 10 target organizations that we want to really focus on, that will be recommended to us by the hiring managers for these areas. This is normally done about 3 weeks before all of our requisitions officially go live. So the whole key theme of this is being proactive rather than reactive. And again, our hiring managers really love this. We will then pass those organization charts to the hiring managers in around that 3-week point before the recs do go live, and ask them to come back to us having reviewed the organization charts of these competitors with themselves plus with their own teams, because there's a strong likelihood that they will either have come from these organizations themselves or their team members will. The software sector is actually very small. And that then allows us, with our sourcing teams, with the people that they've identified on those organization charts, to be extra strategic in terms of how we're targeting some of these people. So the second layer then of the market mapping exercise is actually mirrors the exact same content, but is much more in a list type format. So it is the candidate name versus the country versus the organization, plus this time we'll have phone numbers and email addresses. That piece of information or intelligence is invaluable to obviously our sourcing teams and puts us in, again, a very proactive position. The third layer to that then, again, which hiring managers absolutely love, is a summary that we'll produce on our findings. So it will include up-to-date key themes on the status of our competitors, if some of our competitors might be letting people go, if there's more of a certain skill set in certain locations versus others. They love this level of intelligence. And all of this is obviously done internally within our own teams versus it impacting our budgets, bringing in external vendors. We have analyzed the results of this, and as a very minimum, if this market mapping exercise is done in the right way, it will save us a very minimum of 2 weeks on these per requisition on these large-scale projects. The second piece of this, live search. So this is completely different concept, but equally very much reliant on how we use the LinkedIn Recruiter tool. So live search is pretty much that. It is a live search, but there are 3 key stakeholders that will take part in a live search meeting. The live search meeting normally takes in or around 1 hour. The 3 key stakeholders are the hiring manager, our internal sourcer, and our full life cycle recruiter. So it will normally be conducted over, because people are normally based in various different locations, it will be conducted over a live WebEx session or a live shared desktop session. And the aim of the live search is to go into the LinkedIn Recruiter tool live and conduct searches against that hiring manager's requisition. So this has actually become mandatory on every requisition that we work on. A number of reasons for this. So I'm sure most people in the room, as a standard part of their process, will use an intake meeting with their hiring managers. So what we find with intake meetings, yes, they are great, but they can tend to be a little limited at times because they can feel scripted, or they can feel like it's sometimes a tick box type exercise where you're asking standard questions and you're getting a certain level of information. When we conduct this live search, the type of dialogue that's taking place is very, very different. So naturally the hiring manager is giving you a whole bunch of extra information and really, really identifying a lot more. You're coming away with much more knowledge as to the type of candidate that he or she is expecting. So live search in terms of time, again, I know we're all obviously really, really interested in time to hire and time to fill. How this can impact our time to hire and time to fill. If we, by the end of that 1 hour session, we will ideally, the aim of the session is to have a list of target candidates walking away from that session that we know all 3 parties immediately agree upon. Versus your standard process where your internal talent sourcer gets their requisition, they work on the search for, let's say, 3 days. They pass those, they come up with 8 candidates that they feel will realistically make it to final or offer stages to the full life cycle recruiter. Full life cycle recruiter sits on the candidates maybe for 2 days because they're super busy themselves. They pass it on to the hiring manager. The hiring manager is away at some crazy conference in the Excel arena for 2 days, sits on those candidates for 2 days, and then pass back to the recruiter, back to the talent sourcer, and that time is probably coming to 8 to 10 days. Versus via the live search, you're saving 2 weeks there straight away, with all parties agreeing upon candidates that we can reach out to straight away. One of the other key benefits of live search is that I'm sure everybody at any one point in time has a hiring manager that may have some unrealistic expectations around the requisition that they're owning and that you're working on for them. And we've seen multiple examples of when the hiring manager gets onto this call and actually realizes that there aren't inundated candidates out there that want to come and work for them, for their team, for their location. It isn't a bottomless pit of candidates, that they will actually change their requirements, and that can then make us fill the rec that bit quicker as well. So 2 examples there, each of which are very, very different, but have huge influence as to how we use the LinkedIn Recruiter tool. And from analysis, as a very minimum, each of them will save us 2 weeks on our time to hire, time to fill on average. I like this one, actually.
I know there's disco divas out there in the audience. I can see you from here, and believe it or not, he's one, regardless of what he says as well. First out on the dance floor every time. That particular song, no mountain high enough, no valley low enough, no river wide enough. Why did I pick that? Because we're talking about the searching, all right? It never stops until you have found the right candidate for the position. And a lot of you, I'm sure, always look at potential pipelines for future roles as well, whether they're more difficult roles to fill or even if they're roles that you consistently look after. The searching is always there. So you'll see from the quote behind me that we're talking about what can I do that will take me further. From a recruitment perspective for us, this means harnessing the power of social media and using that to explore every possible avenue that we have. So we all know now that the answer to most things lies in Googling it. You can find out a lot by doing that. Or indeed, you would know the geographical location, the last meal, and the emotional steady state of somebody by a quick check on Facebook. Too much information sometimes. But however, you'll see behind me a number of widely recognized online tools and social media platforms from Facebook, Google, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, everything that's there. It's not an exhaustive list. I know that there's many more that could feature on the slide as well. And it's also worth pointing out that for particular regions and countries, there's localized tools that are very effective in terms of a sourcing strategy as well. So some of you, for example, would be familiar with Xing in Germany or Sinaweibo in China and so on. The one thing that all of these tools give us is a global playing field in terms of finding candidates. So previously, candidates who we would have thought were out of range are now very much within our reach because we have access to these tools. Most of our recruiters would have accounts on each one of these. And we also have a very important emphasis in the team that we don't just use social media for posting job descriptions. We want to be involved in the online social media conversation. And very importantly, we want to add value to that as well. So we also include in our social media strategy information about our company, information about recruitment, information about technology, the industry, and of course as well, we provide information about our jobs and opportunities. When we look at those online conversations, it usually leads us to more names, more contacts, more forums, and more groups. And from that, we develop an extra element to our pipeline as well. In a lot of cases, what we do is we take those extra names or contacts and we actually cross-reference them with LinkedIn. And in a lot of cases, that actually will bring up a profile that may not have appeared in the search that was originally done. The value in that for us is extremely important. Joe is going to talk to you in a moment about the metrics and the results that we get. In relation to social media and cross-referencing that with LinkedIn, it increases our numbers significantly. So we track every hire and every source, and that includes LinkedIn as a source. But if we include the social media contacts that we cross-reference with LinkedIn, we actually find that our LinkedIn assisted hires increases by another 50%. So on an annual basis, that's in excess of 200 hires that we get from LinkedIn and LinkedIn assisted recruitment. So I'll lead you on to the next section here. It's a beautiful day. Sky falls, you feel like it's a beautiful day.
So, yeah, I had to get the Irish plug in there. It's a very, very Irish thing to do, so I'm very impressed. I'm sure we all know this guy, Reid Hoffman. He's the reason that we are all here today. He is the original founder, obviously, of LinkedIn and pretty much the guru as to the way that staffing recruitment is going forward in the future. So I guess keeping with that theme, and LinkedIn, please bear with me for the next 60 seconds. And we, as I said earlier, we do run internal surveys within our own teams. Normally every 6 months. Just over 12 months ago, we ran a mandatory tools survey. And the idea, or the kind of key theme behind that survey that we were being driven for by staffing leadership globally, was in order to stay ahead of our competitors, what we've been discussing since the outset of this session, was to assess, is there anything that we're missing? Is there, versus 6 to 8 years ago, when we were one of the first organizations globally to take on LinkedIn recruiter accounts, is there any tool out there that is potentially going to be the next big LinkedIn that we're missing? And can we get that knowledge from our teams? The answer, LinkedIn, you'll be happy to know, was an overwhelming no, there isn't. So we assessed within that survey, and did have almost 150 responses, things like how user-friendly tools were, what tools had the most up-to-date candidate profiles, what tools got the quickest candidate responses, what tools got the most accurate responses. And from those findings, it was an overwhelming in favor of the use of LinkedIn Recruiter. So it was a real realization moment for us as staffing leaders, because we had always been looking for, is there something that we're missing out on? And we did, I suppose, take a step back and say, okay, LinkedIn is here, it's very, very much here to stay, and we need to continue to evolve how we're being strategic about how we use the tool. So we are seeing the next stage of our evolution is a lot of what Olivia was just discussing, and it's that combination of using different social media tools to get to the best people. I'm sure people will agree that candidates are becoming more and more demanding all of the time. People, everything needs to be done in real time. People are busier than ever before, so it's how we get to these candidates in the best possible way. We're just kind of introducing some of this stuff actually in APJ, and it's like looking at how we looked at EMEA all over again, and it's really, really interesting. So in terms of our source of hire, our number one source of hire, we have a very, very strong employer referral program. Our employer referral program equates for approximately 40% of our hires. We measure our source of hire versus 38 different sources. And of those 38 sources, LinkedIn is continuously our second highest source. And obviously, there is huge cost savings on that and impacts our cost per hire versus use of agency. So our agency usage in EMEA is pretty much close to zero. And a lot of that is down to our use of the LinkedIn Recruiter tool. So examples being, and getting into some of the actual data, we've had just in excess of 3,000 hires year to date globally. Of those 3,000 hires, we know that there are a definite confirmed just in excess of 400 that have come from LinkedIn. We do estimate that in addition to that, in terms of LinkedIn influenced hires plus the definite hires, that will come to closer to in excess of 600. So that's bringing us up to just over 20% of our total hires globally this year have come from a LinkedIn source. And that gap between our employee referral program and LinkedIn, because of some of the initiatives that we've been discussing today, is actually closing all the time. I know we've kind of touched on it already around time to hire and time to fill, but irrespective of the level of the role, so if it's, in our case, we might say an inside sales representative, which is a more higher volume type requisition, or technical support role, which would be regarded as a higher volume position, which as standard will have a lower time to hire or time to fill than, let's say, a professional services consultant in Sweden. Irrespective of the level of the role or the location, our time to hire or time to fill through these initiatives is reduced on average by between 10 to 15 days, which is obviously really, really significant, and we're constantly looking to improve that. That's what our leaders are driving us to do.
Everyone happy to be at Talent Connect? Yeah. Lovely. Would have liked a little bit more on that one, but we let it go. So when it comes to happiness, the definition for a recruiter of happiness is usually filling a position. Happy, job done, move on. It's very easy because that's one of our key metrics to focus on that. And indeed, we can become very siloed around those figures as well. So while we must fill, of course, the requisitions and the roles that are in front of us in the here and now, it's also important that we take a step back, look up, and think about what we're going to do for the future as well. And that's around the integrity of how we recruit in talent acquisition. It's around the people that we engage with, and it's around the talent pools that we're trying to develop. So you'll see from the quote behind me here, in terms of what we're looking at, anything is possible if you've got nerve. And really what we're trying to emphasize here is just being a little bit more bold, a little bit more creative, a little bit more brave about some of the things that we're doing, and really thinking about how we are going to build for the future. There's a couple of elements that I'd like to share with you today. One of them is around candidate experience, and one is around key initiatives, in particular in relation to diversity. So if we start with the candidate experience side of it first, from a data perspective, we know that we can check NPS scores, or your Net Promoter Survey results, in order to find out satisfaction numbers, ratings and rankings. The numbers are interesting to a point. For me personally, what I love about our NPS survey results is the comments and the feedback that you also get as well. The extra effort that people have gone to write about their experience throughout the candidate journey. So because we were preparing for this event, curiosity got the better of us, and we wanted to find out what the candidates that we sourced from LinkedIn were saying in response to our surveys. And we went back to have a look at all that information, because the in-mail and the messaging is so important to us. We wanted to see if there was any connection. Thankfully, we did find positive feedback about those elements. So we had some candidate, for example, who commented that they were hooked from the very first message. We had someone say that it was a great first impression of the company. And we also had someone say it was a great start to the conversation. So all of those are comments from people that we sourced through LinkedIn, and it showed that there was value and there was regard for the in-mail messages and the content in them. I'll be honest with you, that was a long, manual, hard task to go back and cross-reference everything and see where we were. But on the positive side, straight away, it's after kickstarting another project for us in talent acquisition. And we're actually going to add to the fields in our NPS data to include candidate reference, candidate type, and candidate source. So not only will we be able to monitor the candidates coming through from LinkedIn, but also all our other external sources as well, and just as importantly, all the candidates that are coming from internal sources too. So for us, the candidate experience and what they get throughout the recruitment process is very key, and it's very important, and it's one of the things that we consistently look at. The second element is around initiatives, and in particular around diversity initiatives. So VMware is very much a people-driven company, and in order for us to achieve our business goals, we have to attract, engage, and develop talented people from a multitude of diverse backgrounds and perspectives. So as a company, we have a philosophy that all of us must be evangelists of the talent acquisition process. We must all contribute to the candidate experience, and we must also be vital contributors to VMware's position as an employer of choice. So that's company-wide for us. I want to give you an example from a project that's close to our hearts because it's hosted in our home city, which is Cork. So VMware Cork have an annual diversity event. And at that event, we share information about the programs and the initiatives that we're involved in to try and make a change when it comes to diversity. Where LinkedIn comes in for us in relation to that, it gives us a platform where we can find individuals who are genuinely interested in that topic through various different discussion groups, networks, and contacts. We invite those individuals to our event, and over time, some of those people have actually become guest speakers and panelists at our diversity event as well. The second element that LinkedIn helps us with is in terms of finding candidates who may be interested also in our company and also in the types of programs that we're involved in. So we know specifically that there are some departments who just traditionally are male-dominated departments, like technical support and like sales. So when we look at LinkedIn, of course we're looking at candidates across the board, but we make an extra special effort to find female candidates in those usually male-dominated areas and encourage them to attend our events as well. As a result of that work in the background, looking for interested parties, interested candidates, we've successfully hosted events to maximum capacity in our training and development centre in Cork, which is about 250 attendees. We have had the benefit of hires into our technical support department, into our sales department, and we actually had an added bonus of hiring some candidates for language roles as well, which is another common element within the Cork office as well. However, the best thing for us, or the bonus that we really get out of our events, is that the contact starts to be initiated by the actual attendees themselves. So people who have been at the events come back to us wanting to know more about the company, our values, our programs, and consequently that leads to our roles and opportunities as well. So from that perspective, it is really successful for us to think about our initiatives and how we can explore those outside traditional recruiting. And that, combined with keeping an eye on our candidate experience, is what we're looking at in terms of building for the future. We're just coming towards the end of our session now, so you'll recognize the diagram behind me as one that Joe presented at the beginning of our session. And it looks at the 5 steps in terms of our journey: train, prepare, explore, execute, and build. Very often a journey is defined as being a series of steps that results in a final destination. But one of the key messages that myself and Joe would like to get across this afternoon is that VMware's talent acquisition journey is not a final destination. And in actual fact, it is an iterative cycle that continues time and time again, where we are looking for improvements and enhancements all the time. In terms of the 5 areas that we've looked at, we hope that we've given you some key takeaways. So just to recap very quickly, in terms of training, we can't underestimate how important the value of that customized training that we have is, and how it affects our response rate significantly, to rise from on average 20% up to 32%. When it comes to preparing, again, the impact it has when you're proactive around your market intelligence, resulting in those org charts and market maps, and how much the hiring managers love that information. And secondly, in terms of the live search, you're really engaging your hiring managers, and in real time, they know exactly the profiles that are available and what you're looking at in terms of talent acquisition. When it comes to exploring, leave no stone unturned. Look at every avenue, harness the power of social media, and as we've said, when we cross-reference, our annual year-to-date figure for LinkedIn hires is 400, add on the cross-referenced and we've over 600. So an extra 50% is added to our pipeline by doing that. When it comes to execute, it's all about the figures. LinkedIn will always remain a very powerful source of hires for us and is our second highest at the moment. And again, by looking at our data, we're able to see that from that particular source, on average, we can reduce our time to fill and time to hire by 10 to 15 days. And finally, when it comes to building, stop what you're doing at the moment, look up, take a more holistic view. How are you going to recruit in the future as well? Look at the candidate experiences and the feedback that you're getting there, and in conjunction, look at the diversity of your pipelines and how you can open that out to a much more inclusive audience. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join myself and Joe for this session, and I hope that we've shared with you some of the tips and techniques that we use within our talent acquisition organisation.